This show is not intended for the treatment or prevention of disease, nor as a substitute for medical treatment, nor as an alternative to medical advice. No part herein, nor any statement, act, nor omission made by Cormac Mannion or Amplitude LLC or its agents or affiliates are to be construed as treatment of any medical condition, medical advice, nor to delay necessary medical treatment. Scientific evidence is discussed for informational purposes only. No patient-doctor relationship is formed. Hey guys, Type-IIx here. This is the 13th episode of Gear Growth and Gains, brought to you by Meso-Rx, the leading platform for open and unfiltered discussion on enhanced bodybuilding. Members freely share experiences, hold sources accountable, and ensure transparency. No censorship, just real reviews. Visit Meso-Rx at www.thinksteroids.com. If you want to subscribe to the Gear Growth and Gains newsletter, my semi-monthly 1990-style email newsletter, for those of you who are too young to have even heard of Dan Duquesne or Usenet, that means straightforward, descriptive, scientific, without bells and whistles. Then visit amplitude.com and click sign up for Type-IIx's newsletter. And don't forget to check out @GearGrowthGains, one word, on Telegram. Alright guys, so in this episode 13, I will discuss 3 sections. So the first section will be blood viscosity management, managing hematocrit and hemoglobin increases by androgens. Second section will be why some people become remarkably strong without building significant muscle. And the third section will be navigating the peptide landscape, what women should know in 2025. In section number 1, we'll discuss blood viscosity management, that is dealing with elevated hematocrit and hemoglobin, or erythrocytosis, or polycythemia, all the same thing, while on cycle or blast. I'm going to gear this conversation to men because women aren't typically using androgens, and if they are, the risk for thromboembolic events is fairly attenuated both by dose and by inherent factors. That is, they tend towards anemia, low iron, and hematocrit and hemoglobin generally as a result, though of course they're not exempt. So the Endocrine Society defines erythrocytosis or polycythemia as hematocrit above 54% or hemoglobin above 17.5 grams per deciliter for men on TRT. Hematocrit is a percentage value that represents the relative blood volume occupied by erythrocytes, or red blood cells. The normal range of hematocrit for men is between 41 and 51%, and for women 36 to 47%. Hematocrit is tied to hemoglobin by the basic formula, hemoglobin in grams per deciliter times 3. Basically, approximately equals the percentage hematocrit, and hematocrit is a percentage. So, for example, a hemoglobin of 15 grams per deciliter is approximately a hematocrit of 45%. So why do we care about hematocrit? Well, hematocrit is the primary determinant of blood viscosity or thickness, and increases to it favor clot formation. This is by increasing the residence time of circulating blood platelets and coagulation factors. It promotes the transport of platelets towards the vessel wall, increasing dysfunction of the vasculature. So when it comes to planning and monitoring a cycle or blast, the first order of business is managing our primary endpoints, efficacy and tolerability. So we seek to always balance efficacy and tolerability, which is an optimization problem of competing effects when dealing with hormones that affect virtually every system of the body. In order to do this, we must first quantify the particular risks, here, that which arises out of our increased hematocrit. So for normal, healthy men, the relative risk of high hematocrit is that for every 5% increase in hematocrit, there's a roughly 30% increase in the probability for a venous thromboembolic event in men. That's independent of age, BMI, and smoking, all factors that increase hematocrit and erythrocytosis risks. So yes, older men do experience clearly greater hazard and substantially greater increases to hematocrit at the same testosterone doses as younger men. So that's a pretty frightening sounding stat, but in order to make sense of it, let's take a step back and ground ourselves in the absolute risk. So for men with average hematocrit, 43 to 46%, there's a 0.16% probability for a thromboembolic event like deep vein thrombosis within 10 years. That's 1.6 per 1,000 person years. If hematocrit increases by 5%, that chance increases by 33% to 0.21% within the next 10 years. It's a very low risk, actually. So 2.1 per 1,000 person years. So whereas increased hematocrit or hemoglobin is associated with venous thromboembolism, CVD, and stroke in men with and without underlying hypogonadism, to date, no randomized control trial has ever actually shown that testosterone-related increases to hematocrit or hemoglobin are associated with arterial or venous thromboembolic events. We're all familiar with the axiom, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but in no vocation is that more true than cycle planning, design, and monitoring. Bearing that in mind, let's discuss 3 different methods for managing blood viscosity. So first, silymarin, or milk thistle, which many listeners might be familiar with as a hepatoprotective agent or herbal liver detoxification agent, sometimes recommended for use with 17-alpha alkylated oral steroids. Well, it's also actually more so a potent iron chelator. So we'll talk about how that can be used to attenuate the increase to hematocrit. Secondly, the COX-1 inhibitor aspirin, that rather than controlling hematocrit or hemoglobin levels, meaning they'll still increase in blood work, prevents the actual blood clotting by inhibiting the COX-1 enzyme in platelets, thereby decreasing thrombotic but increasing bleeding risk. This then comes with additional considerations, even pitfalls. Finally, and with yet more considerations and pitfalls, we'll discuss phlebotomy, it's blood donation or bloodletting, to reduce hematocrit. That's really the shotgun method. So silymarin, flavonoid extract from the Silymarinum or St. Mary's thistle, the milk thistle plant, has been used for its antioxidant and hepatoprotective properties for eons. Silymarin, taken at doses of 140 milligrams thrice daily, substantially reduces serum iron and ferritin levels and induces a positive change in the total iron binding capacity levels. For this reason, it can prevent the increase to hematocrit and hemoglobin brought on by androgens. Prevent. Androgens signal to the kidneys by reducing oxygen availability to increase erythropoietin, or EPO. That in turn signals to the bone marrow to increase erythroferrone, or ERFE. That in turn signals to the liver to decrease hepcidin. That in turn increases iron, or heme. The heme of hemoglobin, or red blood cells, is thusly in essence a product of iron, which is elemental Fe, as in ferritin. So chelation is a type of bonding of charged ions and their molecules to metal ions like iron. The adjective chelate is derived from the claw or keel of the crab and is analogous to the chelating or sequestering by the caliper-like functional groups which serve as 2 associating units to hook in, around, and fasten into the central Fe or iron ion, thereby inactivating it. In this way, silymarin, the potent iron chelator, inactivates the duodenum's signals to the bone marrow to increase red blood cells or erythrocytes, thereby attenuating erythropoiesis and potentially preventing erythrocytosis. So I cannot stress enough the preventive nature of this action. This is not something that can reverse or bring down the volume of red blood cells when they've been formed. Red blood cells have a half-life of about 120 days, so trying to put the genie back in the bottle after our hematocrit hits the mid-50s is a fool's errand. To illustrate the unity of concepts and how these ideas all fit together, I want to briefly mention A1C, as it's known for short, otherwise referred to as HbA1c, where the HB stands for hemoglobin. So HbA1c is a proxy measure of the glycosylated hemoglobin percentage, meaning that glucose molecules bind to the hemoglobin molecule enzymatically, and it's affected by red blood cell turnover. After any intervention affecting chronic blood glucose concentrations, for example, beginning a course of RHGH or using any GLP-1 or double or triple G drug, it takes about 2 to 3 months for HbA1c to register any significant change due to the 120-day half-life of erythrocytes, red blood cells. The same is true for hematocrit. That is a proxy measure of hemoglobin. By the time it gets to the point where you're registering 55% hematocrit on blood work, it's already too late to wind back the clock. Okay, so what's next? So aspirin, we'll talk about that, and dealing with the knock-on effect of increased hematocrit. So without lowering hematocrit, aspirin at 80 to 100 milligrams daily broadly lowers cardiovascular disease risk, prevents blood clotting by inhibiting the cyclooxygenase enzyme, the COX enzyme, type 1, as well as COX-2, in platelets or thrombocytes. This in turn reduces thromboembolic, but increases bleeding risks. It's worth mentioning here that the European clinical guidelines specifically caution against its use for this. There is a risk of rebound upon cessation, such that thromboembolic risk supercompensates above normal once the aspirin is stopped. And not totally tangentially, curcumin, the dietary supplement, is a more selective COX-2 inhibitor with additional anti-inflammatory and anti-proliferative benefits that probably act similarly, but probably not as potently to reduce thromboembolic events as aspirin. But it's a good supplement that does have some benefit for this. Finally, there is phlebotomy, the taking of blood to reduce hematocrit. This is the same as blood donation and is controlled bloodletting. This method is certainly effective at reducing hematocrit, however, it warrants considerable caution. Hematocrit and hemoglobin are not selectively reduced. Ferritin and iron are also reduced, as are many other blood elements. These wouldn't be something you're looking for in blood work, but chiefly of concern on laboratory blood work are blood iron levels, and there may be some risk of anemia on paper. The temptation that should not be acquiesced to might be to supplement iron. Certainly, if continuing on androgens past the phlebotomy, it is my view that fear of anemia is misplaced. Fear is never rational, so to speak, and blood work is a guide, not liturgy. Even if hematocrit and ferritin or iron do become low, oxygen transport is aided by testosterone and androgens directly. You won't be getting winded walking up steps as a result of anemia while on gear. If you're on trenbolone, that's another matter with another cause. The problem is that iron supplements far too dramatically and rapidly supercompensate hematocrit and hemoglobin. Yet again, you'll just lock yourself into a demented bloodletting cycle, so it's not healthy. Treat the problem at its root before it starts. If you're particularly prone to erythrocytosis, weigh the absolute risk versus your objective. Decide whether your risk tolerance can bear it. Recognize and deal with as you will the fact that as you get older, hematocrit will not cooperate. You'll be getting more and greater elevations to hematocrit from each milligram of testosterone each year after you hit your 30s. Listen up, all you enhanced fucks. The Meso-Rx forum at thinksteroids.com is your go-to source for everything enhanced. We're not just another board, we're the most trusted harm reduction community in the game. You should be looking only at unfiltered reviews where members don't bullshit. At Meso, they definitely tell it like it is. Don't waste time with shills. Visit thinksteroids.com/community and stop posting now.
Smart bodybuilders know data drives gains. With Team Amplitude, we track your blood work, monitor your progress, and build protocols that deliver results. Whether you need blood work management or full coaching, we've got the science to back your goals. Stop guessing, start growing. Visit amplitude.com, AMPOULETUDE.com, and put real science behind your next cycle.
Okay, so in section 2 here, we're going to discuss why some people become remarkably strong without building significant muscle. To answer this question, I'm going to state the major conclusions here up front, and then loop back around once more after unpacking each point in turn. So the first point is that building muscle, hypertrophy, is but one adaptation that can result from progressive tension overload, otherwise known as adding weight on your lifts as you get stronger. Yes, this adaptation has many variables that push and pull on the actual machinery of protein synthesis, yet it is completely possible after the initial 6 months of training or so for a gym rat to never make any further appreciable muscle size gains. For example, by training purely for maximal strength, or flexibility, balance, speed, etc., in essence, by following a training program designed for an athlete instead of a bodybuilder. The corollary of this first point is a quote: "A larger muscle is a stronger muscle, but a stronger muscle is not necessarily a larger one." This fact used to be controversial, but it's actually become not just a plurality view, but the consensus view really within the last 6 years or so, thanks to research from the exercise science and muscle physiology fields. In fact, the fastest path to increase strength is generally, if this is what you're after, unlike a bodybuilder, if you just want to increase strength, you can forego hypertrophy training for the agonist muscles or the primary movers altogether. Use hypertrophy methods only as injury prevention for coagonist stabilizers and common or individual weak points. Okay, so another point is that heritable genetic factors result in tremendous inter-individual variation in response to resistance training. So while almost everyone can get stronger over time training with weights, not everyone can build much muscle. Finally, nutrition matters. So let's now unpack this question: why some people become remarkably strong without substantial muscle gain. So the first foremost reason that people fail to pack on appreciable muscle while getting incredibly strong, if indeed they are seeking hypertrophy, is simply mismatched training. The objective of bodybuilding is to increase muscle and decrease fat mass over time. In order to achieve this, one must closely pair the training means and the training modes. The means for bodybuilding are the exercises or implements, for example, machines that maximally increase the cross-sectional area of muscle through an appropriate phase-based approach that causes myofibrillar hypertrophy. It's adding actin and myosin in series to the muscle fibers. And also sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, that's increasing the cell volume of muscle. So the sequence and proportionality depends on factors like the prior training block or the time until an event to be peaked for, what you're emphasizing, either sarcoplasmic or myofibrillar hypertrophy. The training modes for bodybuilding includes resistance and endurance training and involves working mostly but not exclusively in the actual hypertrophy rep ranges with weights. There is ideally an appropriate proportion of training with heavy loads. Heavy, like, triples, where you have 1 rep in reserve, or heavier. And this is to increase motor unit recruitment. And moderate load training should be leveraged as well as metabolite accumulation by manipulating rest intervals. That's really bodybuilding training. You need to, in my view, certainly periodize your training and not only do one mode of training. Critically, not doing these things on some whim or detour where the training was just briefly, by the guy that caught your attention with a new video for a few weeks, but rather it needs to be intentional, repeated, methodical in terms of years, decades throughout your life. At bottom, to execute perfectly, what's required is education that's based on exercise science. Practically speaking, I recommend absorbing every word and even going beyond, appreciating the drive and the will behind it all by listening to everything that comes out of top bodybuilders' mouths. Guys like Dorian and indeed Ronnie, despite his herniated discs and their consequence, those two serve their purpose to instruct, absolutely ooze nothing but training principles. If only the typical listener could get beyond the sound bites and appreciate fully the principles in their foundations. So poor exercise selection is the number one pitfall for those who seek muscularity but never achieve it. For example, relying chiefly on the barbell squat to grow the thighs. Not only the quads, but the hamstrings. Very few people derive great muscularity from this exercise, and certainly not if relied on totally at the expense of assistance exercise. It favors those with relatively short femurs and a mesomorphic build, to wit the only body type that actually responds well to the classical flat barbell bench press, the barbell back squat, and the barbell deadlift for hypertrophy. It creates a selection bias. The straight barbell bilateral biceps curl, the overhead barbell press for delts, the Russian twist for obliques, and the list goes on. These are inferior exercises that most aspiring bodybuilders should replace with better ones, especially using well-designed machines, and take note of their immediate progress that results. I think exercise selection is the number one reason why bodybuilders don't make great progress in the long term. Our people don't make great bodybuilding progress that otherwise should be able to. Then you need to actually design the training program primarily around hypertrophy rep ranges. So training with sets of 3 to 5 is for maximal strength, basically, and strength gains from these efforts come principally from neural factors like improved coordination, increased ability to recruit high threshold motor units, rate coding, decreased voluntary activation, etc. Or peripheral ones like increased pennation angle. Training with sets of 20 or so is for muscular endurance, not hypertrophy. This is resistance to fatigue, basically, and doesn't actually cause increased contractile muscle fiber cross-sectional area. It can enhance enzymatic bases and give a transient pump, but vitally, All three of these ranges must be used strategically to continue making gains beyond an intermediate status. Heavy load training gets us stronger, so we can do more hypertrophy training. And if we don't do any pump training, we're not maximizing growth. And we're bound to get hurt with those heavy loads because we don't have any endurance. So form follows function. Even the most perfect training planning and programming is limited by the genetic endowment of the bodybuilder. Genetics matter a great deal. The absolute and relative Type-IIx muscle pool, those most growth responsive fibers, determines to a large extent the capacity to pack on muscle. Genes like ACTN3, AR, myostatin genotypes, variations in the IGF-1 and GH receptors, binding proteins, and just basic body frame type or somatotype, meso versus endo versus ectomorph, determines so much about the rate and absolute limiter of our adaptational reserve. For further discussion about genetic endowment for bodybuilding, I put a link in the show notes to my article titled, What is the Meaning of Genetics for Bodybuilding? And last but certainly not least are the nutritional factors. Sufficient nutrients, but not in excess, are fundamental. The diet aspect is simple, but it is not easy. In phases of caloric restriction, nutrient timing becomes very important to support intensive muscular work and training bouts. Carbohydrates are needed for muscular contraction around training. High quality protein, not all protein is created equal, and being disciplined with what you shove in your mouth matters so much. The nutritional aspect is by far the most difficult part of bodybuilding for everyone. Most of us love to train, but nobody loves to cut. Those who succeed are essentially highly ambitious and feel great shame for not achieving what they're capable of. That's all it comes down to in the end, basically, if you have the genetics and you're training intelligently.
All right, this is for the beasts out there looking to take your gains to the next level who haven't yet read Bolus, a practical and reference guide for the use of human GH and GH secretagogues. This is not some bullshit bro science manual, nor is it a cynical money grab with some copied and pasted studies. Bolus is a game-changing practical and reference guide that is packed with real, research-based protocols that'll make it possible for you to reach stage-level conditioning and muscularity if it's in the cards whatsoever, in short time and to a level impossible without this knowledge. Here's why you need this book in your life. Number one, it's got real protocols applied to real bodybuilders using compounds from GLP-1s to IGF-1s. We're talking bulk cut and recomp strategies that actually work. Number two, you learn how to interpret research like a pro. No more getting lost in the scientific jargon. This book teaches you how to look at these studies quickly. Number three, risk versus reward balancing. Because we're not here to fuck up our bodies, we're here to optimize them. And number four, it covers everything from pharma grade to UGL preparations. You'll know everything that you're putting in your body. So whether you're a competitive bodybuilder, a strength athlete, or just fighting father time, Bolus has got your back. It's not just for meatheads either. This book is for chemists and physicians who are using it as a reference, at the very least, I imagine, to see what bodybuilders are actually doing in practice. So get a free preview of Bolus on the web at bolus.amplitude.com right now and learn how to do more with less.
Hey guys, I don't know what you're doing for your blood work, but if you're using anyone besides Synopsis, you're lighting money on fire and probably not getting the right biomarkers to boot. This is especially true if LabCorp's within driving distance to you because they're literally 1/3 the price of the competition. Use coupon code Type-IIx, that's TYPE-IIX. It's not case sensitive. You'll save 10%. If all you have nearby is Quest, they're still the best option because while there's like one cheaper company, they don't offer as many biomarkers and they end up not being worth it. So sign up for the Research Labs Insider at phlebotomics.org. That's FITOMICS.org for by far the best lab work options available in the US, except for New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, where self-requisition and blood work isn't legal, at least not yet. If you're confused at all, the best thing to do is visit my site at amplitude.com, click sign up for Type-IIx's newsletter, sign up, and when I send out my occasional, valuable, never spam newsletter, I include the steps to sign up and use Phlebotomics. So in this final section, section number 3, navigating the peptide landscape, what women should know in 2025, I'll lay out a small guide on how to safely navigate the world of peptides, including an actual protocol used, doses from research, risks, benefits, and effects of popular peptides. So the first one, is quite female specific, is Glow. Glow comes in various formulations, almost universally containing the core ingredients GHKCU, TB500, and BPC157. So GHKCU is an endogenous peptide molecule that declines as we age that is involved in angiogenesis or blood vessel growth, and so is integral to wound healing. GHK-Cu, or glycyl L-histidyl L-lysine, is stimulated after tissue injury, attracting immune cells, exerting antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, collagen synthesis, and skin fibroblasts. So it serves as a tissue protective and anti-inflammatory agent that modulates multiple cellular pathways involved in skin regeneration, stimulating the synthesis and breakdown of collagen turnover, and modulating the activity of metalloproteinases and their inhibitors, collagen, dermatan sulfate, chondroitin sulfate, the same MSM and chondroitin joint support, and decorin. So it restores vitality to skin after radiation exposure, accelerating not only skin healing, but hair follicles, GI tract, and bone. In cosmetics, it tightens loose skin, improves elasticity, skin density and firmness, reduces fine lines and wrinkles, reduces photo damage and hyperpigmentation, and increases keratin function. It affects over 4,000 human genes. So it comes in concentrations that I've seen as high as 35 milligrams per milliliter. There's probably higher ones out there, but it's sometimes more conservatively recommended in women for subcutaneous skin application at about 1/20th or 5% that amount once daily, so like 2 milligrams subcutaneously, or about a quarter of that, 10 milliliters, say, topically to the scalp once nightly for scalp regeneration or to protect the hair follicles. So aside from injected glow, GHK-Cu can be found in topical creams as well, for example, at concentrations that have to be higher because of transdermal absorption. So you might see like 6 milligram concentrations along with argireline and Lufazil to reduce skin wrinkles and fine lines. In human trials, the dosage of GHK-Cu has varied depending on the specific study and the research goals. The dosage used in human studies have ranged from 1 milligram per milliliter to 100 milligrams per milliliter. Doses referred to in practice do get up there. For illustrative purposes, here is the GHK-Cu protocol by the online user Anella96814/fine-tail2468. All instructions for lab research only, not for human consumption. A bolus of BPC 157 at 10 milligrams and GHK-Cu 50 milligrams is applied as, use 3 milliliters of bacteriostatic water, 1 reconstituting syringe and 1 diabetic syringe for administering to lab subject. Emphasis, drop 1 milliliter of bacteriostatic water and inject into a 5 milligram BPC vial. Once reconstituted, drop that 1 milliliter from your first BPC and enter it into another 5 milligram BPC vial. The total is 1 milliliter of bacteriostatic water and 10 milligrams of BPC 157. Drop the 10 milligrams of BPC 157 and 1 milliliter of water from your BPC vial and inject into 50 milligrams of GHK-Cu. Now you add 2 milliliters of bacteriostatic water for a total of 3 milliliters bacteriostatic water with 10 milligrams BPC 157, 50 milligrams GHK-Cu in one vial. So let's talk about BPC 157 and TB500 as a unit. So, two similar peptides that overlap in many effects and functions. So both BPC 157 and TB500 are peptides that have been studied for their potential therapeutic effects on various conditions, including tissue repair and inflammation. So while their exact mechanism of action are not fully understood, there are several known and putative mechanisms that have been proposed for each peptide. So the BPC from BPC 157 stands for body protective compound, and it was originally identified as a gastric peptide from the stomach. BPC 157 has anti-inflammatory effects, chiefly evidenced by reduced gastric ulcers and colitis, promotes tissue repair, angiogenesis, and promotes healing, protects against oxidative stress. More speculatively, it's hypothesized to modulate growth factors like vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF, and fibroblast growth factor, FGF, to promote tissue repair and modulate inflammatory pathways like the nuclear factor kappa B, or NF-kappa B. It's a pathway to reduce inflammation. So TB500 similarly promotes tissue repair, angiogenesis, or the growth of new blood vessels, and healing of damaged tissues. It's been shown to reduce inflammation in models of injury, such as heart attacks and muscle injuries, and it modulates gene expression for genes involved in tissue repair and inflammation as well. So more speculatively, TB500 might modulate cell signaling pathways by modulating various cell signaling pathways such as AKT/mTOR to promote tissue repair and regulating growth factors such as IGF-1 to promote tissue repair. In this sense, TB500 has some overlap with anabolic growth factors like GH and secretagogues and IGF-1. It additionally might modulate the immune system variously. So, two important classes of peptides for women seeking to achieve outstanding body composition changes are the so-called GHRHs and GHRPs, or GH secretagogues. GHRHs and GHRPs, really a misnomer nowadays. Those are more from like the early 90s, those terms we use. Not a big deal. They still kind of work. But growth hormone releasing hormone receptor, or GHRH, are agonists like tesamorelin, or growth hormone secretagogue receptor, or GHSR agonists like ipamorelin, have considerable benefits for female recomp, cutting, and bodybuilding pursuits because they're more potent in women than in men with fewer side effects. I will tell you all about these and show you how to apply them this weekend in the symposium that I'm presenting on the Gear Growth and Gains Discord server with streaming and simulcast, but not open to discussion to the @enhanced_bodybuilding channel on Telegram. So if you want to just follow along with the conversation and you're on Telegram, not Discord, hop in @enhanced_bodybuilding. You can follow, but you won't be able to ask any questions or get involved in the Q&As or anything like that, but you can pay attention to it and listen. If you want to actually take part, I just recommend hopping on Discord, the Discord Gear Growth Gain server. I'll put all this in the show notes for your perusal. All right, guys, that's the show. That was great. Thank you for listening.